Kenya's opposition supporters took to the streets of Nairobi again on Thursday in muted protests against tax hikes and the high cost of living.
It's not the fault of the youth that are on the streets, it's the frustrations of life. We don't have any employment. That's why we are finding ourselves in this situation. When you see the youth in the streets, it's because they don't have any jobs.
It's the second consecutive day of protests, and police maintained a heavy presence. An afternoon rally called by veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga's party did not materialize. On Wednesday, several people were reported shot, some possibly fatally. More than 300 people were arrested, including several opposition leaders. The Wednesday to Friday demonstrations are the third round of protests that the opposition has called this month. Odinga lost last August's election to President William Ruto, his fifth election defeat in a row, and has repeatedly called for acts of civil disobedience. Ruto's government says the higher taxes enacted last month were necessary to help with debt repayments and to fund job creation initiatives.
Protesters clashed with Kenyan police on Wednesday at the start of 3 days of protests that President William Ruto said would not be allowed to happen. Demonstrators, angry at high costs of living and tax hikes, hurled rocks at security forces who responded with tear gas. 2 water cannon trucks and dozens of riot police were stationed at the entrance to Kibra neighborhood in the capital Nairobi. Inside, tires were burned amid running street battles. The opposition Azimio la Umoja party called for the protests in part because of tax hikes enacted last month by Ruto's government. 2 previous rounds of protests earlier this month saw at least 15 people killed and hundreds arrested. Police had fired tear gas and, in some cases, live rounds. Ruto was elected last August on promises that he would champion the interests of the poor, but prices for basic commodities have risen. Ruto's levies on fuel and housing are needed, his government argues, to help with growing debt repayments and to fund job creation initiatives.
For we believe strongly that every hustle matters.
A private sector lobby group has said that the protests have cost the economy more than $20 million per day. Civic leaders have warned about sporadic incidents of apparently ethnic-based violence. Churches and civil rights groups have called for Ruto and opposition party leader Raila Odinga to resolve their differences through dialogue and call off the protests.